action buttons. Please feel free to applaud or hit the thumbs up whenever you hear something that resonates with you. If you have any questions during the event, can I ask that you please pop these in the question box, not the comments box, so that I can ask these either during or at the end of the session. You are, however, welcome to use the chat box to share your thoughts and also let us know where you're dialing in from. We always have a great range of locations represented, so please do share. For those not familiar with the Good Governance Academy, we're a non-profit organisation that was established by Professor Mervyn King in 2019. We collaborate with organisations all around the world to educate and empower leaders from all types of organisations, large and small, public and private, and everywhere in between. We run regular webinars to raise awareness of the issues that matter. And if you'd like to see what we have coming up, please head over to our events page, which I'll share a link to in the chat window below. I'd also encourage you to join our mailing list and follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel to ensure that you never miss out. In addition to the webinars, we host colloquia twice a year. Our 14th event will be taking place later this year. If you missed any of these previously, please head to our YouTube channel where you can find recordings of them all. We also run showcase events to promote courses which the Academy has endorsed. The courses we endorse are those which address a broad range of governance-based topics and provide users with current and relevant content. Our last showcase featured a course from the Bernard Institute in Canada, which is a responsible AI program for boards and the C-suite. The two programs that might interest our audience today are based on ISO 37000, and they're from our partners at Fluid Rock and Executive Education Online. You can find more details on those on our training page, which I'll also share links to in the chat. So on to today's webinar, and I'm delighted to be joined by Carolynn Chalmers, the CEO of the Good Governance Academy and one of the world's leading voices on governance. Carolynn was instrumental in the development of the ISO 37000 standard, and she led the development of the standard we'll be looking at today, ISO 37004. So Carolynn, thank you for joining me. I'm excited to share this follow-on from our event in June, and I hope it will have just as much engagement from our audience. Can I hand over to you for an introduction before we take a look at how and why organisations should assess and elevate their governance maturity?
Thank you so much, Mark. It's great to be here today, and thank you for the great introduction. Yeah, I think we're a room full of geeks today because governance assessment is, not something that most boards think about, or they do it maybe every second year. But it's us geeks that really like to get our hands dirty in how this is done, yeah. and look at all the nuances that go around it so that we can make sure that our organizations really do their best. I'm going to just share my screen, if you don't mind, share my presentation. Hang on.
Please do.
There we go. Hoping that you will, there's our page, the event page. Here we go.
Great, we can see that.
Okay, brilliant. All right. So today we've had a couple of events in the last couple of months, and today we're going to be talking about navigating levels of success. Oh, I see I'm a day behind. So the 11th of September. And really we're going to be looking at, how do we know whether we are improving and what level we should be improving to? Just a reminder, this ISO 37004 ISO standards are international standards, so lots of countries have participated, and experts from many countries have participated in the development of these standards. It's not just the voice of one person or one thought. It's many organizations and many people and experts from around the world, from many different countries. And various countries now they adopt these ISO standards as national standards. Here in South Africa, we've adopted ISO 37000, on which this is based, as a South African national standard. And 37004, again, is part of the process of adoption in South Africa. So this becomes not only just an international standard for comparisons across companies and organizations around the world, but it becomes a national standard, a national benchmark as well. I think importantly as well, these standards in the governance space are guidance standards. They're not certifiable standards. You can't be certified in the governance of organizations according to ISO 37000, or certified in that you've applied ISO 37004. So I've added in a slide here, Mark, if you don't mind. This is not in the slide deck that's on the website, but I have had many questions coming back about, and let me just get back. Sorry, am I jumping all over the place? Get back to what have I done? There we go. Can you see me? Is that all right?
We can, yes, yes.
Okay, good. I just can't see you. So lots of questions have come through about governance versus compliance. And really what we've learned around the world is that when you have a compliance requirement for how the board or the governing body of an organization is to behave and what it's to do, we find that is a lot of money. It's a lot of box ticking, and it doesn't really change much. And we think about specifically Sarbanes-Oxley in the US, which is very compliance-driven. And we still, after Enron and the disasters that happened there, the governance disasters, Sarbanes-Oxley came in and said, well, you shall now have a code of ethics and all of these kinds of things. And it really hasn't changed things. We still get bad behavior because, as Prof. King says, we can't legislate good behavior. We can only legislate society's minimum acceptable activities. And thinking about what society is looking at, from our organizations, the governing bodies of our organizations, it's not just, compliance. We actually want our organizations to do their best. And doing your best is not a minimum societal norm. It's not something that we can say, if you don't do your best, you get penalized. Certainly, we can say, if you don't do the minimum, we're going to penalize you through whatever it is. It could be jail or could be penalties. So I just brought this in to give a background to how these governance sits. So first of all, there's the country's constitution. Then the country on top of their constitution has laws and regulations. That's again, as I said, is society's minimum standard. So due care, skill, acting, those are fiduciary duties. And then you've got your voluntary obligations, like your commitments to clients, agreements that you've entered into. You've got your shareholders agreements, your MOI, that's all part of your memorandum of incorporation or your articles of association or your constituting documents that essentially are establishing that organization, the purpose of the organization. And then you have your codes and standards and your guidelines, essentially. So really, there's a tremendous context within which you're having to look at these, at governance codes and governance practices. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not something we can audit per se. It really is quite dynamic and subjective in its nature. Okay, so here endeth that lesson. Let's go back to 37,004 now. So this is just a recap from the last, just a 2 slides recap. It is international guidance, and what we're looking at is governance maturity, so different levels of governance maturity. And it provides us with a model to evaluate, compare, and improve governance maturity. So yes, ISO 37,000 gives us some what we're trying to achieve when it comes to the governance of organizations, what our outcomes are, what the organization can benefit from. So looking at effective performance. Obviously, when an organization is well governed appropriately, the organization itself can see effective performance. You can look at an organization it's behaving ethically, it's using its resources responsibly, its resource stewardship. All of those are indicators or outcomes from a well-governed organization. Now, how do we achieve those outcomes? 37,000, the ISO standard for the governance of organizations, its guidance standard, gives us a set of 11 governance principles. And I'm not going to go into those principles now, but all principle-based guidance or codes or reports on the governance of an organization really lives in this space that says, what does doing your best look like, as opposed to the minimum? Regulations, laws really say these are the minimum that you require.
Yeah.
Now, some stock exchanges, for example, those kinds of institutions that are trying to bring behavior into more regulated space, talk about, compliance with a code or report, or even a guidance standard. So compliance with ISO 37,000. As a regulator would say, I want you to comply with 37,000. Now, as it's a guidance standard and it's principled based, there is no shall do this, but the principles themselves speak about you should be doing this. So essentially what the regulator is saying is that you should be doing that as a shall. But just that principle, not the key aspects of practice, because every organization is different. Different resources, different people, different culture, different sizes and types and industries and regulations and all sorts of things. So how you apply those principles has to be different. And it's up to the governing body to decide how they're going to apply those principles. So in ISO 37,000, we have 11 principles, and they talk about having a purpose of the established purpose of the organization with a commensurate value statement, having value generation objectives, having a strategy, that the governing body should oversee the organization and, provide transparency and through disclosure demonstrate accountability. And those, if a regulator was to take a guidance standard like ISO 37,000 or South Africa's King reports, for example, those then would then be you shall have a purpose established for your organization. You shall have values statement that aligns with makes sure that you achieve the purpose within those values. So those things can be compliance kind of based, or certainly required, but how you go about doing that is really not something you can say. And to do that, you shall have a code of ethics, because every organization has different ways of doing things, and we're going to get into that today.
Can I just say, I do wonder whether a lot of companies do take the compliance only route because it's the path of least resistance. It's the easiest thing. It's kind of clear and easy. Whereas when they have to think about, what is doing the right thing, what should we be doing ethically and sustainably, there's a lot more thought involved in that. But I'm hoping with this standard, it gives companies that kind of benchmark that they can say, okay, if we follow this guidance, then we are going to do the right things, but we're also going to be compliant as a byproduct rather than it be the driver.
Absolutely. Checking the box is always easier. There's no cognitive load. There's no thinking required. But that's not what we're looking to from our leaders. We want our leaders to think what's in the best interest of the organization, not just to tick a box and say, this is the best for the organization. No, it's not. So very good point, Mark. Thank you. So one of the other things that we looked at was why measuring this maturity matters, as opposed to just, these are the principles and here are some practices and I'll go ahead and do it. Well, as I said, measuring, saying whether you have a policy or of this or of that really doesn't tell you the propensity or the ability for that organization to be well managed or well governed or improving their governance. How can you improve the governance of the organization? Isn't this fairly static? You oversee, you do this. No, things change. We can improve. And so these are just some 6 things that we brought up around some ideas around, well, why is this important? Well, first of all, it's accountability. We make sure that we do continuously improve. So we are matching what society is demanding from us, what's changing in the environment, that we optimize our resource allocation. A board, let's be honest, the board very, very rarely has its own budget. The budget lives with management of the organization. That's part of agency risk. So management has the budget and then provides funding to the board for it to be able to do its activities. So we can't, as the board or the governing body, be the tick on the organization sucking it dry. That's exactly what we don't want. So we need to also be careful with the resources that we use. Also, we want transparency and trust. Stakeholders are looking to the board, to the governing body, to help strategic decision making. And making sure that we are improving the way that we're interacting with management. And then, of course, fundamental to this is that it's built on a foundation of compliance. So we do need to make sure that we continually comply, and that legislative framework is changing all the time. Our country in South Africa, we don't have legislation around AI, artificial intelligence, and emerging technologies. The EU has just come out with an AI Act. Well, governing bodies in South Africa should be looking to that in terms of guidance, because there's a large set of countries that have come up with some minimum acceptable behaviors. So we should be looking to that. So that's why it matters, is really that we should be doing this for improvement purposes. If we take a snapshot in time, that doesn't tell us anything. It tells us perhaps where we are in time for a particular set of circumstances.
Sorry, Carolynn, just quickly, do you have a pop-up open on your screen?
Is it breaking up?
Just had a little block in the corner of the presentation.
Okay, let me try again. How about now?
It's still there, but it's in the corner. It's not interfering too much, so don't worry.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No.
Okay, so the last one we looked at was the governance maturity aspects. So this was what are we measuring when it comes to maturity? It's not just the principles. You are applying the principles, but very importantly, we look at, well, this is why it can't be compliance. We're looking at the behavior of the governing body when governing the organization. We're looking at what practices the governing body chooses when it's applying the principles. And we look at how efficient, so how are you communicating your governance of the organization through the organization and through the organization to the organization's stakeholders. So that was the last a webinar that we held. So, and Mark, all of that information is available on the GGA's website. So when somebody says, I'm wanting to do an audit, I want internal controls, what are you trying to control? Well, the only thing that auditors look at is whether you've documented so in the purpose and value, is your purpose documented? Is it a statement? Your purpose is documented. And do you have a code of ethics or a code of conduct? And that's just one principle. Now, as you can see from these aspects, that's very, it's very subjective. How effective is that? Is that code of ethics? Are people actually applying it? Is the governing body adhering itself in its decision-making to that code of ethics? Or are they, we'll make this decision irrespective of the minority shareholders? So those are the three aspects that really we felt internationally drive the improvement, the governance activities of an organization's governing body. Last session, we also looked at what what would the levels of improvement be of those three aspects. So I've just brought them together in a slide here, but they are in the slide deck from the previous webinar. So you could see, what does it mean to be effective? Well, it's unclear, incomplete, consistent, unmeasured. And then, at the very highest kind of order of effectiveness, we're looking at continually improving. So from all of these, you can see that we've got 6 levels here. So the way that the ISO standard works is we go from 0, there isn't really anything in place, to a level 5. And that's there was a lot of debate around this in terms of, is it 1 to 10? Is it, what is this? Yeah. What is the scoring levels? And this aligns with essentially all of the other ISO standards around maturity levels in the management system aspects, the 0 to 5. It also aligns with a very new piece of work that's being done and explored to standardize on the ISO levels of maturity. So it very much aligns with that. And we had that working group as part of our decision-making on this maturity scale. So this is very aligned with international thinking. I think importantly, Mark, there is no middle point here.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to go, I'm there,
you have to make a decision. Yeah.
That's right. You are either on this end of the scale or you're on this end of the scale. And it's, as you can see as well, it's an integer. It's not a continuum. So, you're not a 4.5 or a 4.8, it might be better than, you're and I'll get into this, how you record it, but you're a 4, you're not a 4.8, or you're a 5. So it's all very subjective. Now, what I tried to introduce is that these numbers are subjective assessments. This is not a behavior. How can you say, oh, I'm a 1 behavior? Are you going to say to your child, oh, Johnny, you're a 1? Your behavior is a 1. Sometimes we'd love to do that, but it's not like that. So I'm just going to unpack the scale. And now this is when we get into the geeky stuff. So there's quite a lot of information overload. Thanks for the laugh. It's nice to get some reaction. I'm not just laughing to myself now.
I just wanted to say quickly, Carolyn, one thing that we found whenever we've run assessments on people before on organizations, there's always so much focus on what number are we? We think we should be a 4, but we're actually a 2 or a 3. But I think it's losing really the point. When you do these measurements, it's really to give you a guide of where you're at and where you want to be. So if you are a 3, it might be that's fine. That's where you're aiming to be. That's all you'll ever be because of constraints or exterior. But I think people get too hung up on the actual score. The value in this whole thing is the process in looking at why you got to that number, what you can do to go above it, or as I say, whether you're fine where you are. But I think it's just to reiterate there that the number isn't the kind of driver. That's not what you're aiming at. It's the process that you go through to get there that's the kind of highlights all the things that you could be doing that maybe you're not.
Absolutely. What is a number? It's somebody's assessment. Somebody's they think that that's what you should be, but I agree. It's about the story around the number. Heisenberg's principle in science says, as soon as you measure something, it's changed. And that's exactly it. What I find with these board assessments, and I sit on boards and committees and various things, and they come around and it's another survey, and I go in and fill in and I check my boxes. Where do I think I am on these things? But it's not about that. Actually, it's about the conversation afterwards. It's about the discussion that goes around. Why did you think that? Why did you say that? And so more time should be spent on that than coming up with the number. And that is what we're looking to our leaders for. It's not just, yes, to make a decision, but what went into that decision making. And what is the result? What is the consequence of it? As you said, what do you do with that number? So lots of kind of words that we use in the standard. So a 0, basically we're saying doesn't really exist. I'm just taking, now these are all my words. I've extracted the text from the standard. Please, I just don't use the slide deck. Just a word of advice and caution, don't use the slide deck to think that you know the standard. Buy the standard and read the standard. And the reason why you pay for a standard is because it does get reviewed every 5 years. So the standard itself has to keep evolving with how practices are evolving. That is just the reason why we pay for ISO standards. So 0, no evidence. And I'm thinking in terms of those different scales. There's no evidence that you've got anything in place, really. There's no commitment to having anything in place, and there's no application of principles because you're not committed to the principles anyway. A 1 looks like there's something happening. It's limited. There's maybe well, certainly you've got your constituting documentation. That's a requirement, compliance requirement, but maybe you have a strategy penned out. You've got, but there's minimum commitment to any kind of, maybe active governing of the organization. And there is an intent to think about board work and board meetings and decision making at that level, but it's very limited. It kind of looks like that. What does a 2 look like? A 2 looks like, well, it's emerging. It's kind of happening. We're thinking about the governance of an organization. There are some documents available. Maybe there's some in draft or they're not formally adopted, but it is there. There is commitment. There's complete commitment. Yes, we are going to do this governance thing. We should do this governance thing. But when it comes to the applying of the principles, I am applying the principles and I am managing as an organization. We are managing the application of principles, but it's just a step beyond an intention. It's not actively managed in terms of its cohesiveness and comprehensive approach. And that's really where we look at 3. Now we have got governance in place. We can say, yes, we are governing. It's organized. We are talking about it. We are doing things around it. We are assessing ourselves. We're actioning it. It is a cohesive set of policy documents now in the organization. And we do that once every 2nd year, when we think about it. And it's always it's a grudge, but it's there and it's happening. 4 says this is a bit more than a grudge now. Now we're using it as a strategic advantage. Our evidence is aggregated. Our policies talk to each other. I mean, how many policies, I just think in the IT space where I'm involved, we have a policy on data and data privacy, but then we have another policy on how data is going to be structured or confidentiality of data or records management, and they don't talk to each other. Yeah. Whereas 4 says we checking that these things talk to each other. They really provided an aggregated whole that guides an organization. The board is active in its governance of the organization. They're not just pitching up for meetings. They're not just reading their packs. They are actively engaged with understanding, hey, something's happened in the market. What are we doing about it? Where are we going? Should we call a meeting to discuss this? And let's just get on the call with the chair of the audit committee. This new standard has come through. What are we going to do about it? That's active. It's not just waiting for the next meeting. And then when it comes to our policies, so we're actually assessing that the organization really is, being governed according to the parameters that we've set. And people in the organization know that we've even set these policies. So it really is measured. But 5 is now, we're really being creative in this process. It's optimized. We're proactively governing. We're improving our governance. We're committed to actually governance is a strategic advantage for this organization. So that's generally, if I can explain the measurement scale. Are there any questions around the measurement scale that perhaps have popped into the chat?
We don't have any questions or anything in the chat at the moment.
Mm.
But is it possible that in different parts of the organization, I mean, governance obviously is for the whole organization, but would you expect to see different levels in different parts of the organization?
Very good question. Absolutely. And ISO 37000 talks about integrated governance. In fact, it calls it a condition in which the governance principles should be applied.
Right.
And that condition is that governance is delegated. The decisions made, governance happens in the boardroom, in the governing body, but through the delegation, it happens, you see governance happening through the organization. So the governance maturity model really is intended for the overarching governing body.
Mm.
But we have business units, and business units are governing organizations. They are self-governed within that context. And so you'd want a business unit to assess their governance. It's not the same level. There's far more management happening and less governance when you're sitting in a business unit because it's not overall accountability. But certainly you'd want to assess the governance there of a business unit. Are you being effective? Are you efficient? Are you behaving well when it comes to decision making that affects the business unit? So you would expect it to be different. And you would expect various business units to be different amongst themselves because it's a different scope, it's a different environment. And please, trying to add them up together to create a score.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly try and do that. But, really you're comparing apples and pears and coconuts and, and cell phones, you're trying to add them all together. You can maybe use it as an indicative, but again, it's the story behind it. It's, why are you sitting at a 2? And can we even compare these two business units? So absolutely, Mark, it's a good point.
Yeah, and just on comparing apples and pears, I mean, is this something that organizations might be able to benchmark themselves against? So if people do publicize these results, if that's even, something that people consider doing, is there any point in benchmarking against other companies to see, what their scores are and what yours are, and where the difference might lie?
Our not the next webinar, but the last webinar in the series will talk about, and what now. So you got the number, what now? How do you go about reporting on it and disclosure and that kind of thing? So I will talk about it more there. But this is, again, I mean, you can have the number, but I wouldn't put a number in the report. I wouldn't say we're a 3. I would rather say why we think that we're a certain level. What is the story that goes about where we are? And really it's where we are and where we're trying to go to. Or where we've been and where we're trying to go to, because that's what your stakeholders want to see. Is not, we're 3. Okay, well, great. So what does that mean for me? I'm a reader of the report. Okay, so I'm a 3, and Joe Bloggs assessed you subjectively as a 3, and Anne Backer over there assessed company B as a 5. Does that make a difference? Is the 3 or a 5? So there's a whole story.
Sorry, I see we've just had a comment from Patrice saying that good governance is not a competition. One must be at the level that's most suitable to the organization at a given point in time. And what's important is how one progresses. And I think that's, it makes perfect sense. And it goes back to this compliance thing versus just doing the right thing. These guidance is out there just to make sure your organization is doing the right thing. So if you get into comparing scores, that might lead you back down that path of just, doing what's needed to do to raise your score rather than doing what's needed to do to improve your organization.
That's it. I was fortunate to peer review an IFC, International Finance Corporation, guidebook on governance for SMEs. And that was used as input into the standard. So that's also a good source of information. But you have a good point, because I'm going to go on to the next level now, the next, trying to expand this out. Do you still have that block?
Down the bottom right,
Is it big?
It's covering the last two words of number 5.
Okay, I will
But
talk to them.
but we're sharing the slides with everyone, and so don't worry too much if you can't see
Yeah,
everything on the slide that is shared.
great. Thanks, Mark. All right, so taking this measurement scale and applying it now to those 3 governance aspects that we spoke about, I just aligned it with this and I said, well, look, the evidence is really about efficiency of communication. This is just, again, my theory.
Yeah.
Efficiency of communication. The commitment is about your behavior, and the application is about effectiveness. Efficiency is about efficiency of communicating so that you do get that integrated governance. Behavior is the attitude of the governing body towards governance, and effectiveness is then your communication. Effectiveness is applying the principles in practice. How are you applying the principles? So if we just have a look at efficiency, so this is the communication. Now we think about efficiency as documentation. What would limited look like? Well, you've got an incomplete set of documentation, if anything. You've got your documentation, but it's not communicated. It's misunderstood, or people don't even have it in their hands. So people in the organization don't even know that you've got, the board has given you parameters within which you can do your job, which are, that's the board level. These are the principles that you should be applying. Information should be secured. Do your staff members know that information should be secured, and do they understand that that's a board parameter? So it's misunderstood. What about formalized? Well, yes, it does exist. It is communicated, but it's, we don't review it. It kind of sits there and it's becoming a bit dusty, and every now and again we shake it off and remind everybody. Actually, it's measured. So this means it's there, it exists, and we get feedback from our stakeholders. It gets corrected. It gets, we actually measure how people are using this, and we really are staying within those parameters. And optimizing means that we actually use that on the basis of how can we better innovate. So I think about an organization in South Africa. We have an organization called Discovery and Discovery Health. I had the great fortune of working for them many years ago. But what I found they did incredibly well, and this is not a secret, but they innovated in mentioning information security. They really innovated around information security so that they kept in a closed vault what really couldn't be shared. And we can imagine some of the health data that couldn't be shared. But they really did use some of the information that could be used for innovation purposes. Now, that was not something that some data manager, the chief data officer decided to do. That was done in conjunction with the governing body, with the board, that says, when it comes to data governance and the use of our data, we're going to innovate on that basis. Now, this says we're going to innovate our communication of that. So we're not only innovating our application of the principle that says data should be secured, but we're also innovating how we're communicating that to people. So because people need to know at a point in time, when I'm using this piece of data, what are the parameters, what is the compliance requirements, but it has been effectively communicated to me through it's in my DNA. Click policies, video clips. I know what I'm doing as an employee when it comes to using that information. So actually, the organization has innovated in its governance parameters around that subject area. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, sorry, just to interrupt again, but I think this is why governance has such a huge impact on culture, company culture, because when you find you have toxic cultures, it boils down, I think, mostly to a lack of governance and people not driving the right behaviors, not communicating the right behaviors and the right practices from the top. So I think they're kind of very closely linked.
Getting into behavior, exactly what you're saying is that it is that culture from the top. So behavior where it's okay, obviously they don't believe in it at all, or it's not appropriate, sits at 0, but at 1, actually starting to adopt things. It's not just resolutions on decisions made, which is a compliance requirement and minutes, but they're starting to adopt practices. They understand what the governance requirements are. In fact, at this point, they can actually recall what the 11 governance principles are. So we need to ask ourselves, if we think we're behaving well as a board, and we put ourselves as at 5, just ask the board members whether they can remember the principles of the code that they're supposed to be applying, let alone the policies that they've told their organization they need to apply. So, can I remember the 11 principles of the ISO 37,000? Because that means I understand what it is that I'm doing. I can recall it. The next level is I'm actually applying it. I'm using it. Risk governance, I know that that's a principle, and this is how I'm governing risk in the organization. I'm applying that. I'm actually doing this. Not only am I applying this, I'm analyzing how what are the results of my governing of risk in the organization, and then how can I do better? How can I create? Are we actually thinking as a governing body, as a board, in our behavior? How can we create and innovate and move forward in our governance of risk? So it's a behavior. It's not the net result. It's our intention too. And this is, as you said, Mark, toxic culture is that we're not actively governing. It's just because we were told to do it. And we just meet, and I'm filling a seat, and I get paid my amount per year for filling a seat. Effectiveness is about taking that principle and applying it, like information should be secured. Well, when it comes to data governance and data and decision making, how effective are we at applying that principle? We know about it, but it's incomplete. We've kind of adopted it, but there's no real guidance. I've put guidance out, but I said, it's inconsistent. There's a policy on that because we said we had a policy on that. There's something on that because we said we'd have, and I'm not really communicating my policies, and I'm not being very effective. But yes, otherwise I'm communicating, effective in my governing of the organization. I assess how effective I am. That's the 4th one, and the 5th one is I'm actually assessing and improving. So you can see how these build up on each other. So this is, what are the levels of maturity? These are the levels of maturity, and generally, and you could see how it looks the same, but it looks different across the 3 governance aspects. I want to go into a conversation about what these look like in when are they appropriate and when are they not appropriate. But are there any questions around these levels? Because today's event is really about the levels.
So, and we have a question or confirmation required from Oscar, saying, is the number what the company is doing in terms of governance and not the location of where it is?
So the location of where it is, I'm assuming is put a pin in, this is where you are, as opposed to physical location. But this applies no matter where you are in the world. But put a pin in where you are so that next year or the year after where you assess it, you had a place that described where you were there, and the number gives you we were at a 3, we want to be at a 4, but rather than going through, I'm going to read a paragraph now that describes where I was, I'm going to read another paragraph where I want to be. Actually, I was a 3 and I want to be a 4. I'm a 2 and I want to be a 3. I'm a 4 and I think that's far too much. I'm going to be a 3. So that's why we use the numbers. It's basically for brevity, for ease of description.
Right.
I'm going to go into the
So we have another question from Harshal here saying, would you consider using AI to gather the data from the discussions and responses and mark them against standards to suggest a score based on what information has been provided?
Certainly AI can help, but I would say that AI doesn't help in gathering the data. I think AI helps people to explain to others what they're thinking. So when a board member says, I think when we're doing risk governance, I think I'm worried about this, that, and the other thing, and they write their whole thing out. And then AI comes along and you say, please summarize that so that everybody else can understand what you're talking about. And it summarizes it up and you go, that's what I meant to say. Not in 100 words, but in, that's 5 words that, yes, that encapsulates what I'm trying to say. So I don't think AI can bring the scores for us. I think AI can certainly help us communicate better amongst ourselves. And then just bear in mind that those prompts need to be right. You're dealing with people you don't know that have trained this AI, but certainly you can go back and go, please summarize what I'm trying to say here so it's better interpreted by others around the table. And then that can go, oh, yes, that's what I was trying to say. That's far more succinct, and you can rephrase it, and then you can make your funny words, I feel like this, that, and the other to be far more formal and professional. So that's what I would use AI for. You can't use AI to say, okay, so what are we trying to, how are we trying to measure, do we have policies? Well, the fact that you have policies or not actually isn't the point. Do you as a board member remember that you have policies, and are they accessible, and are people reading them? Do you know that as a board member? Well, most people don't. Do you know if your policies are being read? Have you asked the question of whether those policies are being read? That's more important. So I hope this gives a sense of where we are. I'm going to go now into when is what appropriate. So we've got our 6 levels. I always say 5 levels, there's 6 levels. And this is just my personal observations and my personal thinking. Having done this, and you can see from my grey hair, quite a few years, and I'm sure we've got some other grey-haired governance geeks on the call. But I want to look at when is it appropriate and when is it inappropriate. When is a level 0 appropriate? When you've got nothing. Well, when I'm self-employed. I'm not going to have a governing body. I'm not going to have policy documents. It's me, myself, maybe a bank wants to do, I'm asking for a loan to start, and that's a move into a startup. I'm wanting to employ an executive assistant to help me. And to do that, I need an office and premises, and I've got a business plan. And now the bank wants to know, okay, well, what have you got in place? Well, I don't have anything in place, but that's the honest truth. This is where I am. So actually, that's appropriate for a self-employed. But when you start becoming a micro and growing, you do need to have some, a funder and investor in your business, including banks and things like that. They do want to know that you are effectively making your decisions. You're not just, I need to buy this and this and this and this, and I pay rent and I enter into these. Actually, there's been some thought process that's gone through it. Overarching, not just about a specific point, but what does that mean for the long term, in the long-term best interest of this organization I'm trying to create now. I enter into a 20-year rental agreement. That is a long-term strategic decision. That now starts knocking on governance, whether I can sign it or not. Oh, of course, I'm the owner managed, I can sign it. But is it in the long-term best interest of what I'm trying to build here? So level 1 then becomes your micro enterprises, and also your highly unregulated kind of environment. Your moms and pops corner store. If you're not a branded, just trying to make a living on you generally fairly unregulated. You're just creating your business. So I wouldn't go and put huge amounts of governance on top of it, board meetings and things. But when you are small and you're starting to grow and you've really got something here and it's starting to work and you're starting to bring others in with you, really a level 2 is kind of appropriate. You need to start seeing emerging practices. Whereas a level 3, now you are a medium organization, you've got people on board, you're going out fundraising now. You are certainly got your banks on board, you've got overdrafts and all of those headaches that go with it, but perhaps you're now driving your growth. So a level 3, you should be formal.
And can I just cut in again, Karen? Because I think, and we've seen this with fast growing companies that are kind of small but are growing. When they forget about governance, it makes things very difficult when they have grown. So they really need to give it thought. So even though you might not need everything in place that you would if you're at level 5 or a huge company, level 2 and 3 is really when you need to be giving this some proper thought about where you're trying to go to and what you might need in place. Because once you've grown, trying to backtrack and then start implementing the things that are, will support you. And again, governance is about, it's a strategic enabler. And if you do forget about it, then trying to think about it at the last minute is going to be very difficult. So I'll definitely encourage companies at this stage to start giving it some serious thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just quickly going to go through the other two because I see we are running out of time. Sorry, because this is no. This is a discussion. A measurement is a discussion. It's not a number. When you actually go back and measure the governance of the organization, it's appropriate for a highly regulated environment. So you're in financial services, you're in pharmaceuticals. This is highly regulated, and you're a large organization now. You're not only got your policies and you're applying your principles, and you're actually measuring how effective those are. And then at an optimizing level, there are very few organizations that need to sit at this level. It's very large groups in very innovating environments, fast moving. I would say it doesn't have to be highly regulated, but really the leadership from the board and growing. And so I think about, there's a great group in South Africa, Bidvest. It doesn't comply with things like, your chairman shouldn't be your CEO, but they are fast moving. And certainly they go back and the board is very on board and very hands on, not in managing, but in governing. Your asset managers and your investment houses, if they are buying and selling companies at a fast pace, if that is their core business, you would want to make sure that the governing bodies of those organizations can move at that pace as well. So that is optimizing. That is using your governance as a competitive advantage, really. So when is it not appropriate to be at a level 5? Well, when your organization has got some subsidiaries that are battling, and you've got, as I mentioned, this one organization, the board, it's a low margin business, and the board was supposed to meet 6 times a year, and in 1 year met 82 times. That's not optimizing. That is paying yourself to have board meetings. So you're in a resource low margin. You have no need to meet 82 times. It's completely inappropriate to be optimizing as you're sitting at a level 5. It takes a lot of time and money and effort from the people around in the governing body to be at an optimizing board level. It has to be appropriate. Likewise, in a measured environment, you want to see organizations, if you are a highly innovative, it's a rapidly and changing environment, you should look at more than just measuring. You should be looking at innovating. When you are in a highly competitive environment and you've just got your formalized governance, actually you could do more with your board to really, you could get more out of your governance from a strategic advantage perspective than just being formalized. If you're in a highly regulated industry and your governance is still emerging, I would be worried. You really need some formality around decision making, and you need clear parameters within which people in the organization can operate. You are highly regulated, and now you've got an emerging governance practices. There's a mismatch there. When effective decision making is required, and you, even though you're micro enterprise and you are unregulated, when you are needing for purposes of fund allocation, perhaps in a capital allocation. So is it, if it's financial or human resource capital, or, you know, a natural capital, but effective decision making is required. So you need to go through and say, you know, this is how we made the decision. Limited is a bit too little. And then finally, if you're self-employed, but you've got significant stakeholder dependencies, so you've got people depending on you, be it the bank, be it, you know, other people depending on that you've done a piece of work, I would say that not thinking about governance is actually, you know, it's D2. If you've got huge dependencies, and these are just my thoughts, these are things that I've found, that's why there's no ISO brand on this. These are things where I've come across some thoughts around application. I just want to go to your last question about, does one number say it all? Is there one ring to rule them all? And no. We need to understand the purpose of your assessment. Is this, and this goes to your question about, you know, do we report and disclose on it? Is this a self-evaluation? Is this for disclosure? Are you trying to use it for comparison over time? That is going to impact, you know, what you're saying and what you're actually focusing on. Again, the Heisenberg principle. As soon as you look at it, you're going to change it. Yeah. What are you trying to measure? Is it how well the board is behaving? Is it how efficiently you're communicating? Because you can take all the principles and look at all the principles and just look at behavior. You don't need to look at the whole set. Why are you, again, mindful and purposeful? Why are you doing this? Then single digit comparisons. Yes, you can use that single number as an indicator to give a sense of what is the dominant perspective here, you know, and you've got a description for what a level 3 is, the limited, or level 2, and that is the dominant perspective. But what are the outliers? Because if you've got risk governance that's really being incredibly well done, and you've got data and decisions that's being really poorly done, let's have a discussion around those. Because that is really important information. And then when you're actually aggregating, as I said before, it is the integer, not the 4.5 or 4.2. That means nothing, because we're trying to look for that dominant perspective. And how do we create that integer? Well, if you're putting it in spreadsheets, and this is all the accountants in the room, we looked at, and we had we had all the mathematicians around the world, the experts coming in, and is it the median, or is it the mean, or is it we trying to do this, that, the other thing? At the end of the day, it's not about the number, as you said, Mark. It's about a dominant perspective. Where are we from a decision-making perspective? So we went with an arithmetic mean, the average, rounded down. So if you are 4.8, actually it means that you don't have everything that's, you know, indicative of a 5. And then what are you going to do with this? What are you using this in terms of application? Is it the maturity of your risk governance? Is it maturity of data and decision making? What is your, you know, you can apply this to a single principle, to a single governance aspect. You can apply it to a single business unit, you know. So it's a model. This is not an answer. This is not a compliance requirement. This is a model that allows you to use this, you know, to be able to compare, contrast, and look at things from a perspective that everybody's speaking the same kind of language, and it's guidance for that purpose. So very subjective, not very objective, but it allows, if somebody from one year to the next, if we have Joe this year doing our assessment, and in 5 years' time we have Anne doing our assessment, Anne and Joe will be using the same guidance so that there is more comparability than having, organization, the green organization and the blue organization having their own ways of doing things, assessing you, in those 5-year period.
Yeah.
So that's really what I tried to get through today. And I know we're at the end of time. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. We don't have any questions. There were a couple of comments, and one, Patrice was saying that I think even startups should be looking to put focus on governance because it's always important. I think it's more about how much time you put into measurement rather than actual governance that we were saying is kind of lower down the list. And Moketsi was saying that governance culture should be inculcated irrespective of company size, so that as operators increase, governance maturity should be an evolutionary, iterative matter as opposed to a sudden imperative tick box practice. So, yeah, I think we're all in agreement with that.
Very important points. Yes. Thank you.
We are at the end of today's session, so I'll have to draw it to a close. So I'd like to thank you, Carolyn, for another insightful conversation today. I think it's really high time that we stop seeing governance as a compliance topic and realise it is a value, a strategic enabler. And I think it's clear that this standard is one of the ways that we can do that. So we'll be sharing a summary of today's webinar on our webpage and our LinkedIn page. And we'll put the full recording on our YouTube channel. If you've got any comments that you didn't want to post today, but feel that you might like to share, please put them on our LinkedIn page when we post these messages out, because it'd be great if we can continue the conversation after the webinar. My sincere thanks to all of you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time. And as always, please do share your comments and feedback.
Thank you so much,
Karen.
Mark. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.